Hello and welcome to Pro Home Inc.'s Housing Counselor's Corner, where each month we produce a short video discussing different topics such as home buying, housing counseling, and financial literacy. I am Paul Chase, the Managing Director for Pro Home, along with Program Manager Terry Arruda and Video Series Executive Producer Leslie Rhoda. And today we also have First Home Mortgages Loan Officer Derek Andrade with us. Welcome to everybody. So before we begin, I'd like to remind our viewers that the opinions expressed are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of Pro Home. Also, this program is for entertainment purposes only, and you should always consider contacting Pro Home directly at 508-824-2514 when it comes to your specific real estate and counseling needs. So let's begin. Let's get started. Today we're going to talk a little bit about mortgages and how to go through the mortgage process, particularly for first-time home buyers who might not have done this before. And so we're very fortunate to have Derek today and Terry as well. Terry works with our first-time home buyers at Pro Home, and this is a good plug to say not only do we have a first-time home buyers session every other month, right?
Correct.
Where you can get your certificate that they need, but we also offer one-on-one counseling for first-time home buyers. So that's all there for the counseling, the one-on-one counseling. There is no charge, and there's a small fee on the educational program. So certainly contact Terry for more about that. But today we're going to talk a little bit about the mortgage process. So I'm a first-time home buyer, Derek, and I find a house I want to buy, and I need to start the process, right? But we all know the process even starts before that.
Correct.
So what would you suggest if someone is getting ready, say, for the spring market to look at houses for the first time, they've never bought a home, they don't know what the process is like? What's the first step for them?
So, in my opinion, I think preparation is key. Kind of getting ahead of what you're trying to do and setting a goal for yourself is vital. Meeting with a lender that can kind of get you established and set up for the purchase is absolutely crucial. So number one, a lot of first-time home buyers don't understand what their buying power is.
Good point. Okay.
So getting to figure out what your buying power is, A, how much can you afford? B, are you comfortable with what that payment is going to look like?
Okay.
So just because you can get pre-approved, let's say, for $500,000, that doesn't mean you're comfortable paying that payment, right?
Right.
So we don't want first-time home buyers to be discouraged by looking at properties that they necessarily can't afford the payment on.
Okay.
So the key is to kind of reel them in and get them to look at properties that are within their wheelhouse. And give them a realistic expectation of what they're looking for.
Okay.
The other parts of preparation are, do they have enough assets to finalize the transaction?
Okay.
Are they eligible for any type of first-time home buyer programs and down payment assistance programs? Is their credit in a position to qualify them for their programs? The sooner we can find these answers, now we can start to prepare them with things like credit repair, finding ways to save up more assets, look for grants within certain counties, look at different down payment assistance products that are out there, and really get them prepared for that spring market, per se.
Sure.
From time to time I get the borrower that goes and looks at a house, they're all excited about it, they haven't been pre-approved, they get pre-approved, they put the offer in, the offer goes in, and then they really now start to look at the numbers now that it's been accepted. Now this is real.
Right.
Now it's real life, this is really happening, and now they become timid. Now they're like, oh, that payment's a little too high. If I use all of this money, I'm not going to have any savings left.
Right.
So because it's last minute, they really don't have that full expectation because everything is going so quickly. They haven't had time to digest the information. So in my opinion, getting ahead of that sooner and having a realistic expectation of what they're walking into is very, very crucial in the home buying process.
So sitting down with someone long before they even start looking at the properties to better understand what they need to do.
Correct.
Yeah, it makes sense. And I'm sure, like on the counseling side, that comes up sometimes. Whether it's a first-time home buyer or you're counseling someone that's post-purchase, and they have this weariness of, oh, what did I just get myself into? Because
Oh, yeah.
they weren't prepared.
Correct.
Right?
Yep.
And you see sometimes people in situations where you just wish, like Derek said, what they can afford might not necessarily be what they can afford.
Yeah. Sometimes they're not even aware that their credit is such an obstacle as well.
That's a good point. And like you said, I mean, credit doesn't necessarily mean, it might be someone with not so great credit, but it might also be someone with a situation on their credit that needs to be taken care of in order to be able to go forward with the mortgage. And that might take some time. So
Correct.
Another reason to meet with someone first to see what that credit kind of looks like, and if there's something on there that needs to be, whether it needs to be a statement written about it or something needs to be taken off there, that can be worked on before you get a surprise while you're standing there offering a house.
Yeah, correct. And credit plays a huge role in the pricing of these loans. So the interest rates are predicated obviously on a risk analysis from the banks. And if your credit is in a lower tier, you might get better pricing just by bumping yourself up 10 points. So knowing that ahead of time and saying that, hey, if I can go from a 630 to a 640, I can save a quarter of a point on my interest rate, and all I have to do is pay off a credit card for $1,200, and that gets me over that hump.
Right.
Kind of being able to work on that ahead of time, helps these folks put themselves in better positions to not only get a better product, but also get a better interest rate in the long run.
Great.
Well, I've had a lot of clients that would come in and they say, I pay my credit card on time. I'm always on time. But it's the income to debt.
The debt to income ratio.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's affecting them. They've got their credit lines tapped out.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And that affects them big.
And sometimes, right, and there are all types of factors. Sometimes they do pay their credit card on time, but it's one credit card, or they have a credit card, but they haven't even rented yet, so they don't have a rental history, and all that kind of plays into what you're going to see as far as, like you said, either an interest rate or if you're even going to be approved. So
What can you do with alternative credit? What's some of the alternative credit you can use?
We can do like a 12-month rent verification. We can do credit on, like, if they have utility bills or cell phone bills, like supplemental credit. We don't run into that too often where we need to do that.
Okay.
We mainly run into that when people don't have enough open trade lines on their current credit. Then we'll have to do some supplemental credit. But for the most part, we're running off of the credit report. Anything outside of that is supplemental to kind of strengthening the loan file.
And if you're an independent contractor of some kind, there's even more to that as far as verification. And if you're working for yourself, which a lot of people do, there are a lot of gig operators out there. There's a lot of construction independent contractors and stuff. It's a whole other realm.
Correct. Your self-employed borrowers are always challenging, and I think a lot of it has to do with just sheer education, right?
Right.
From whether we're talking about credit or self-employed borrowers, a lot of these folks just don't understand the process. They don't understand what goes into it. They're relying on some type of third party to feed them this information as far as how they should proceed, and that's not always the best information that they should get, especially when they're trying to buy a house. So like I've seen, particularly on credit reports where, someone will tell them, hey, I think you should take your mortgage and put it in forbearance. And it's like, yes, that can work as a short-term solution for your certain situation, but that might not be a good long-term fix.
Right.
So understanding what forbearance means and how that's going to impact you in the future is important to know before you make that decision.
Right.
And if you don't speak to the right people, then you can get misinformed and put yourself in a worse situation you begin.
And we see that from
Yeah.
time to time at Pro Homes. So again, I mean, we work in forbearance counseling. We also financial literacy. A lot of what we're talking about here too can be rectified through some financial literacy
Yeah.
programs that we offer at Pro Home.
I think it's a good place for people to start.
Yeah. So I'm a first-time home buyer, and I've made an offer on a home, right? Just let's briefly go through the steps of getting that mortgage, just so people that don't know what it's even like, what happens.
All right, so typically you make an offer on a home,
Right.
offer gets accepted, we get we would get the offer in our hands we'll structure the whole loan depending on, credit profile, assets, debt to income, etc.
Right.
And we'll come up with a program that suits the client's needs,
Okay.
whether that's going to be an FHA loan, a conventional loan, whether we're using down payment assistance. We'll put that all together. We'll go over all that with the client, make sure that they're fine with it and that all those numbers work.
Okay.
We typically will now refreshen up on all the documents that we've gathered. Hopefully we've done a pre-approval prior to this and this
Yeah.
isn't like a last minute thing.
Okay.
We already have some groundwork laid there as a foundation, but we're typically going to update the W-2s if a new year has started, new pay stubs, new bank statements, make sure that the assets are there.
Right.
If they have any other outside criteria, like if they're non-U.S. citizens and they have employment authorization cards, or if they're non-permanent resident aliens and they have their non-permanent resident alien cards, making sure that those are all good and valid,
Okay.
make sure that licenses are valid. All the documentation has to all be new, fresh, and valid. Once we have all that information in, and normally we'll go to our processing team. Our processing team will start doing things like ordering title, ordering appraisal, and kind of just getting the loan started for the underwriter.
Yep.
They're collecting all the information, putting it all together. If they see anything outside of the norm, they're requesting any updates or any new information on the documentation that we have
Okay.
before we submit this to underwriting. The underwriters typically take over from there. The underwriter is going to look at everything with a very fine-tooth comb.
Okay.
So they're going to scrutinize bank statements line by line. They're scrutinizing paychecks line by line.
Sure.
Tax returns, W-2s, everything has to match to a T. There are times where employers make mistakes and the W-2s don't match the year-end pay stub, or numbers are in the wrong columns, and we have to kind of get that all verified with verification of employment. The underwriter does their process. They'll typically come back with a list of conditions
Okay.
that they want to see met prior to them giving what's called a clear to close or a final approval.
Sure.
That list of conditions will go out to myself and the borrower. We work on those conditions together to kind of button up these loose ends that the underwriter's looking for. Once those items are buttoned up, they go back into the underwriter for final review, and then hopefully at that time we're getting a clear to close or a final approval.
Okay.
That's a brief synopsis of
Sure,
what happens.
sure.
There's 100 other steps in between that can be involved. There's obviously the appraisal process. We got to make sure that it meets value. It
Versus
meets
what they're
condition.
putting down.
Exactly. Meets condition depending on what type of product we're using.
Right. Because FHA loans require a certain condition of the property.
Correct.
Right.
FHA loans
Yep.
have safety and health guidelines that the property needs to meet. So those conditions need to be met prior to closing.
Okay.
It doesn't mean that the property's not eligible, but typically when the appraiser goes out, he'll flag whatever those items may be, whether it's chipping paint, missing handrails,
Yeah.
broken window, things of that nature. He'll flag those, and the appraiser will have to go out and do a final inspection to make sure that those items were taken care of
In order to
and submit that
qualify.
report back
Okay.
to the underwriter prior to us getting it clear to close.
Sure. So, I know there's no two that are the same, but roughly what is the estimated time from the start of when you begin your mortgage process to the time you get a clear close?
From the time you start the actual formal application, it's typically taking 30 to 45 days to close. Depending on the scenario and how fast things move along, you can realistically close them in as early as 2 weeks.
Okay.
Oh, wow.
But
That's-
everything has to
Right.
quick.
It doesn't happen very
hyper
often
quick.
now,
It
right?
doesn't happen very often.
Right.
Because there's a lot of different, there's a lot of different parties involved in the transaction. So everything has to line up perfectly. The appraisal has to get done pretty much immediately. Title work needs to get done immediately, and everything has to line up. So it does happen, but it's very rare.
Right.
I would say typically it's between 30 and 45 days.
30 to 45 days. And sellers know that, and the realtors that work with them understand. That's why you have certain things in the contract, the purchase and sale contract, about this is how much time you have to obtain your mortgage, and sometimes there's an extension of that. A lot of that's normal, right? I mean,
Correct.
people shouldn't panic too much if they get to the point of their contract and the mortgage piece has to be extended a little bit. Like you said, everything has to button up and match in order for them to allow for underwriting to approve it and that type of thing. So
Correct. And a lot of this is outside of the borrower's control.
Sure.
So a lot of these items, like they don't have control on how quickly their employer gets back to the mortgage company with a verification of employment, right? All they can do is try to apply some pressure to make it happen a little bit faster if needed.
Right.
But at the end of the day, they don't have control over that. So appraisals, they don't have control over how quickly an appraiser gets out and gets that report back in. So those are items that it just takes a little bit of patience to kind of work your way through those items.
And for those that don't know what clear to close means, that's what?
That is your final approval to close on your house and get your keys.
Keys. There you go.
Keys.
So I think, again, a couple of the important points that we've made here are if you have never purchased a home before, it's really actually ideal to speak with someone long before you even start the buying process, right? Because that can help you with your the amount of time it takes to clear to close, right?
Correct.
So some of those issues can be buttoned up even before you start with your first mortgage. So I think that's really the main thing that I'd like first-time home buyers to know about is talk with somebody, get that information up front, get your pre-approval because that makes a big difference.
Correct.
And like you said, not only does it make a big difference while you're trying to work through the mortgage, but it also gives you a realistic expectation of what you can afford because what you're calculated for and what you can really afford in real life, they are two different totally things.
Correct.
And you want to make sure you're protected because obviously we don't
Have them coming in for foreclosure.
we don't want to have them coming in for counseling, foreclosure, and other issues if they don't have to. So,
What would you recommend they not do when they're getting ready to buy a house?
When you're getting ready to buy a house, do not change any of your normal day-to-day habits. So continue to save the way that you save, continue to work the same way that you work. Don't add any new debts.
Like cars,
Don't
and
buy
furniture,
cars,
all
credit
those
cards,
things.
furniture.
right. Until
Change
afterwards.
nothing until after you close.
Right.
I've seen examples of people, wanting to change jobs mid-shift,
Oof.
and that, not to say that it'll impact being able to close on the loan, but it's going to add time to that loan. It's going to add more legwork. It's going to add more frustration for everyone involved. Opening new credit cards again. It might not impact things other than the fact that it's going to delay things and add time and make things more complicated than what they need to be. Sometimes it might put you in a position where you no longer qualify.
Right.
So the key is to stay the course, keep things as is, don't make any changes to your current situation
Right.
until after you close.
Yeah. Good point. Good advice. Well, that's all the time we have for today's episode. So I'd like to thank Derek Andrade and, of course, Terry for coming in and doing this because I think this is very important. Until our next time, our staff at Pro Home are also available to talk with you one-on-one about a variety of housing, counseling, and financial literacy issues, many times at no cost to you. So if you would like more information on our agency, simply log on to www.prohomeinc.org or go to our Facebook page at Pro Home Inc. You can also contact the agency for further information or to make an appointment at 508-824-2514. And again, we serve the Greater Taunton and all of Southeastern Massachusetts area. Thanks for watching, and we hope that you will tune in again next month to Pro Home Inc.'s Housing Counselor's Corner. Have a wonderful day.